Hi, I'm Mansi, a growth marketer at Meritto. I welcome you all to this edition of Education Circuit by Meritto, where we host experts, thought leaders, and decision makers from across the global education ecosystem. In this series, we dive deep into the latest insights, emerging trends, and proven best practices that shape the future of education. Over the past sessions, we had the privilege of hosting incredible voices from institutions like Kalak Atlanta University, Raffles University, De Montfort University, Abu Dhabi University, Sunway University, Asia Pacific University, and many more. Today promises be just as insightful. And for those who don't know, Meritto is a global standard in enrollment technology for colleges and universities. We believe that admission teams shouldn't have to navigate complex systems or struggle with outdated tools in an AI-driven world, where speed and precision are essential. That's why Meritto stands out with a purpose-built solution designed for admission professionals. With its intuitive interface, robust data architecture, and AI-driven automation, Meritto empowers institutions to recruit smarter, engage students more effectively, and streamline the entire admissions journey. And today, we are honored to be joined by Professor May Tan Mullins, Provost and CEO of University of Reading Malaysia. Ma'am brings a deep leadership experience in transnational higher education institutional strategy with a global respected university framework. As Provost and CEO, she works closely with academic and administrative leaders to shape campus culture, strengthen student experience, and ensure graduate readiness with an international branch campus environment. Her perspective on balancing global standards with local relevance makes her especially well placed to offer senior leaders practical insight into building trust, delivering meaningful outcomes, and preparing students for an AI influenced future. Dear ma'am, it's a privilege to have you with us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
And today we are diving into a topic that has become central for international institutions operating in Southeast Asia: trust as the new enrollment currency. As global universities expand into markets like Malaysia, reputation alone is no longer enough. Students and families are looking beyond rankings. They are evaluating credibility, transparency, governance, and whether institution promises consistently match lived experience of students. So let's begin our conversation. So, ma'am, my first question to you is: international universities have traditionally relied on global reputation when entering new markets in Malaysia. And according to you, if we talk about now, what has changed in how students evaluate institutions?
Thank you very much, Mansi. Before I answer this question, which is a very good and timely one, let me have a very quick introduction of myself. So, as you mentioned, my name is May Tan Mullins. I'm the CEO and Provost of the University of Reading in Malaysia. Prior to this, I worked in multiple overseas campuses or transnational projects, such as the Nottingham University in Ningbo, China, as well as the James Cook, which is an Australian university in Singapore. So I do bring to the table quite a varied experience from how different international branch campuses work in different contexts. Going back to your question in terms of how do we not just rely on global reputation, but really what Malaysian students want nowadays is that, as we all know, even though global reputation still matters, it is just not enough on its own anymore, because the parents and the Malaysian students are now becoming more focused on the outcomes, and of course on the ROI, in return on investment, because if they're going to invest so much to send their kids to a university, they want to see what's going to come out of it. And one thing that's very interesting in today's students in Malaysia as well is that our international students coming to Malaysia to study is that they're also very much data driven. So they look at a lot of information, a lot of online sources to find out what are the returns basically, and the returns can be categorized in several categories. First, of course, employability is very important, because now students, when they join, they look at the various career pathways, they look at what universities do in terms of industry partnership, internships, and ultimately the graduate outcomes, because after they graduate they want to be in a good position to look for a good job and continue their journey in their life. So as a result of that, what we're seeing is that value and return on investment is under sharper scrutiny, especially with families who now really evaluate the tuition fees, not just money, but also against tangible benefits such as like accreditation. What about mobility? What about professional opportunities? What about the living cost? So it's really became a more holistic scrutiny in that sense. They are no longer just looking at rankings. They are looking at a lot more other things. The other thing which is quite interesting also with the influx of a lot of data, a lot of information, what students and parents are looking is more of authenticity now, because students also expect full academic alignment with the home campuses and not a diluted version. So they really expect, even though they come to University of Reading in Malaysia, they will expect full academic alignment and the quality and experience that they will experience in the UK campus as well. The other thing I would really like to raise is, of course, the future skill sets is very important. It's very interesting, especially with AI, how quickly things are changing, right? 3 years ago, when you graduate as a computer science graduate, you don't have to look for a job. The job looks for you. Yeah, in terms of opportunities. But just within 3 years, what we are seeing is that there's a huge shift in terms of the future skill sets needs. Computer science students, it's becoming a slightly more challenging to look for a good job. So what students are really looking at now is really programs that are aligned with sectors, emerging sectors, especially with interdisciplinary and of course with digital capabilities. So for example, at University of Reading, we have a law program. So how is our law program going to cope with these emerging sectors as well as these emerging digital capability needs? Are questions that students ask. And I think last but not least, I think student experience is very important. So that's where the campus support, the community, the global exposure, as well as the mental well-being support, all these are very important. And if we have a good system put in place, that obviously will build more trust between us and the student. So in short, in summary, reputation, it does open the doors, but and demonstrate very good outcomes. But I think really is the academic integrity as well as the experience the student have on campus that will sustain the trust, as well as what are students looking for in today's context.
That's a very important shift, ma'am, that you have highlighted. It shows that evaluation today is more outcome driven
Yeah,
than perception driven.
yeah,
Institutions are not being, I would say, assessed on brand strength, but also how they deliver the student experience, how they provide employability skills, how they provide different career pathways, and how they provide future ready skills to the students.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a very important point, ma'am, that you highlighted. So my next,
indeed.
so my next question to you is, when we talk about institutional trust, where does it truly begin, according to you? Governance, academic strength, standards, leadership, visibility, student experience, or somewhere deeper?
I would say it does cover all the points that you have mentioned. And I'm just going to illustrate a little bit more using, for me, what's really important is the keyword integrity. So I really think that institutional trust begins and ends with the word integrity. And why am I saying this? Because I'll give you an example. You mentioned a couple of things like governance, academic standards, leadership. So, for example, governance is very important in terms of building institutional trust. And what do I mean by governance? Governance means very principled, very transparent. Transparency is very important in terms of decision making, builds confidence and builds trust between the universities and the community. And the community, I don't mean just students. Yeah, I'm the community, I mean staff as well. So that's really important. The second thing that when we talk about integrity and how this can build trust is through the academic standards. For example, again, how do we make sure our academic quality teaching standards is, very, very similar across different campuses and ensures rigorous learning outcomes and equivalency between these different campuses is very important. So that's where we put in processes, we put in policies to actually ensure that it really matches and benchmark across campuses is where then the integrity demonstrate that, how trust is being built. The next thing, obviously, leaderships. Uh, I just joined the University of Reading a year and 2 months ago, and I do believe in leadership is really, really important. And one of the most important thing to build trust is by role modeling. So that is when the words that you're saying and your actions are actually aligned. So one of my main philosophy or my main principle is that I'll never ask my team to do things that I will not do. Very important, integrity as a leader. And second thing is that when I say it, I do it myself as well. So as a role model. So when people observe that you as a leader of an institution, you actually do what you say, your team will come along with you. And when students and parents observe that you are doing things out of integrity and you follow through, you explain your decision, it's very transparent. When things go wrong, you take accountability, you apologize if you need to, and that's where you really build trust. And last but not least, I think, and this is where the student experience comes in really importantly, is that credibility of an institution is reinforced when what you promise them, when they decide to come in and study with you, actually match their life experience. Like, actually what you say before they enroll actually happens when they are with you. So that's why, of course, we in terms of marketing, it's nice to say many big promises, but if you do that, you have to match up to the expectation. So that's where it's really important. I'm just going to summarize very quickly. So in conclusion, what I believe is really important is that to build institutional trust, you need to have integrity. And without integrity, whatever you say, whatever structures you put in place, whatever policies are there, they are just symbolic, because you don't follow through. So with integrity and with following through, then credibilities and trust naturally follows.
That really brings clarity, ma'am. It
Thank you.
enforces that institutional trust is being built with integrity only.
Yeah.
So now just we proceed to next question of ours. So how do you balance maintaining global academic standards while responding to local expectations and cultural context?
Yeah, this is always a question I've been asked when leading an overseas campus. How do you make sure you balance it? And balance is really the key word. It's it's really very fine balance. So if you tilt too much to one side, then the harmony will be gone. So what I want to say here is that global standards are non-negotiable. So for example, those standards, quality assurance framework from your home campus is non-negotiable. Yeah. But the delivery of these programs then must be locally intelligent and locally tailored. So just to share a little bit of experience, what we do at the University of Reading Malaysia. What's really important, we have 3 points. Yeah, what's really important is that we separate the what from the how. So what are the standards and what outcomes must be achieved, and these are global. So these are really the what, but then is the how. The how is then how do we localize the pedagogies, the ways that we teach, the types of case studies that we use in our classroom, because it must be relevant to the local context. The industry links, we have to engage with the local industries, partly to, not just for graduate outcomes, but also for internships. And whatever support we put in place must reflect the local context. And it's not just the communities, but the culture, the people that we work with, because what people in Malaysia or what students need in Malaysia is very, very different from students in UK, partly because of the cultural context, partly because of our background, the political systems, etc., etc. So it's a very clear thing. We separate the what, which is very much driven from our home campus in UK, from how. How do we deliver this so-called UK teaching quality and programs and framework in the local context? So that's the first point. Yeah. And then the second point is that we build bi-directional governance. And that's where we constantly communicate through joint academic boards, and there is a constant and continuous dialogue to ensure quality is maintained. There's bound to be challenges, there's bound to be conflict. In fact, I just came out from a meeting just now before this talk, really trying to again addressing the differences between homeschool programs and our local programs, especially if there is differences in the regulations, because in Malaysia we have MQA, which has very different needs or different credit demands in that sense compared to UK. So it's really about balancing that, and to do that we really have to communicate constantly to find the best solution forward. And last but not least, we are talking here in terms of cultural intelligence as well. But I want to re-emphasize cultural intelligence doesn't mean that we compromise the standards. Cultural intelligence, in our perspective, is to respect the local norms, which will then enhance student success without lowering academic rigor. And again, this is really important for me personally as a leader and as a CEO and provost of the university, as well as personally, because I think we do have standards we need to follow. And a lot of those standards are very evident in terms of admissions as well, because as we know, sometimes when universities want to recruit more students, they tend to lower their admission standards, and as a result, you just can't quite maintain the outcomes, or the graduates that you graduate from your university. So those are really important factors to think about. So finally, I just conclude again, is that the results that students, very important, they must feel they must feel like they are fully of a global university. They are not some outpost in that sense of a Malaysian university. They are from University of Reading. They are of a global university, and they are also being supported locally. So by combining global credibility and local legitimacy, then they really reinforce each other, and build institutional trust.
Ma'am, you have highlighted a very important point if we really
Yeah.
talk. The balance between global integrity and local relevance is clearly central to sustainable credibility of the institution. And student expectations must be met, like we should provide them in the industry partnerships, different career pathways, and how bidirectional governance plays a major role in that. So yeah, that was very, very insightful. So my next question to you is, where do you see the greatest risk to institutional credibility? Governance decisions, admission communication, marketing narratives, or everyday student engagement?
The greatest risk.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, there's so many risks, but okay, let me try to talk about the greatest risk. I would say, from my experience and working with multiple universities, which have very different models in terms of how they build their international branch campuses, I do believe, and this is something I just brought up in a recent conference with the British Council in Cairo, Egypt as well, is really the misalignment of expectations, I think. And I see that as the greatest risk, especially when a global, the ecosystem, there are many different stakeholders, right? So if there's misalignment of expectation between these different stakeholders, that is the greatest risk. Let me explain a little bit more by giving you a few examples. The first one, for example, some universities in the world, when they build overseas campuses, they have joint venture partners, right? So they have like a local partner, and then they have a UK partner. If this partner, they do not communicate well and they have misaligned priorities, whether is it about commercial growth and integrity. For example, the local partner wants to achieve 5,000 students within 3 years, while the UK are more focused, the UK partner is more focused on academic integrity, ensuring the policies, processes, structures, teaching quality is put in place, and prioritize that versus the student numbers and the income. If this is misaligned in terms of the timeline, in terms of the outcomes, then obviously it's going to be a huge risk. And I've seen institutions at international branch campuses, they fail because of that. They fail because of the misaligned priorities. The second, obviously, is students, as you mentioned. When we do marketing admissions, we have to be very careful, because if what the university says towards a student is very much not what's going to happen, as I alluded earlier, then the miscalibrated expectations between the students and the university will be a huge risk as well. Another example is the expectation about careers or mobility. For example, in the past, when universities, when they're trying to recruit students, they mention about the chances of post-study work visa. But a lot of the time, for example, there's so many examples recently, government, they just changed their policies, right? They say, oh, from 2 years post-study work visa, suddenly it's like 6 months and you can't bring your family. So that presented as, the expectation is not aligned, and students will be very disappointed. This is not something universities can control, because this is something they can't, because it's a government policy. But that also erode trust in some sense between the students and the hosting in universities. That is a huge risk as well. And lastly, industries are very important. If industries look to universities to provide them with work-ready graduates, and if universities don't do that, we don't train our students to be having the right skill sets and to be graduate ready or work ready, then industry also will not trust the university in terms of employing our students, because there's a huge misalignment of expectation, right? So for me, I think that's really one of the biggest challenges, that if you have no credibility, where you have misaligned expectation across different stakeholders, then that is a huge challenge for universities.
That's a very powerful point, ma'am. Misalignment is really great hurdles for the institutional credibility if it's not managed properly. So now, as we discuss governance and credibility, we cannot ignore one major force that is reshaping education globally, and that is AI. If we really talk about AI is influencing recruitment, engagement, and institutional systems at scale. So that makes leadership decisions even more credible. AI influences that. So how do you think that AI is becoming central to recruitment and engagement, and what should leaders do to ensure it builds credibility rather than risk?
Yeah, I was wondering when AI will come up, because in every conversations nowadays I have, AI is like in the third sentence, in that sense. Yes. It, there are a couple of things that keeps me awake at night, and AI is one of them. And the reason why it's keeping me awake at night is that we've been hearing so much talk about how AI is going to take the jobs from the fresh graduate, and this is really what I'm worried about, because I don't want my graduates to go on to the society and 50% of them couldn't find a job because it's all being replaced by AI. So for me, let me just illustrate a little bit what we are doing. In fact, operational wise, a lot of universities talk about how we prevent students from using AI, because they use it to plagiarize, and compromise academic integrity. I'm taking quite an opposite, and at Malaysia campus, we are taking quite an opposite approach. In fact, we strongly encourage students to use AI. To the extent that we do have a compulsory module in the first year of our program to ensure students understand what is AI, how to use it, and the ethics of using it, because we see AI as a tool to really reinforce credibility, and not, you know, if you use wisely, it can be very, very powerful, right? As we all know. So I'm not going to go into that in terms of AI is good or bad operationally, but I'm just going to go a little bit higher in terms of the strategic level, because your question is asking about leaders, right? What do we ensure? How can we ensure it builds credibility? So let me just go up to the strategic level in that sense. It should definitely be a tool to reinforce credibility and not replace human judgment. And how do we do that? We need to use it to align our purpose and our values with the institutional promise and student experience. And let me explain a little bit, how do we do that? Like I illustrated, for example, making sure they have AI as a tool to use in terms of then graduating and finding a good job. That's the first thing. Another example is that if we're going to use AI as admissions, we need to communicate very clearly how is AI is used in the admission process to ensure ethical and fair and very compliant kind of oversight of how AI is being used in an admission process, because you do not want it to be opaque and not transparent, not just to the community within Malaysia, University of Reading Malaysia, but externally as well. Another thing is that AI also have to complement human judgment. There's a lot of discussion saying AI is going to replace human, but we are taking it one step at a time. A lot of that stems from what's perhaps that will happen in 5-10 years time, that AI will replace human judgment. But let's just take one step at a time. Let's see AI as a very good tool to complement human judgment. And how do we do that? Is then how do we use it to enhance decision making and engagement? How do we use it to be more efficient? Efficiency is a big keyword now when we are thinking of using AI. But at the end of the day, what's really important is that AI must be monitored, yeah, and we must use it wisely to and adjust it, accordingly to maintain trust. And last but not least, AI, we must use it in order in such a way that it doesn't replace nuanced decision. Okay. So again, for example, admissions wise, recruitment wise, when obviously AI can be the first step in terms of sorting out our applications, but subsequently, if there is a not such a black and white case, and that's where the human needs to come in to really assess and understand that nuanced decision, whether should you accept or should you reject a student to the program. So to summarize, if we use it wisely, thoughtfully, it actually helps to amplify credibility, and it helps to, again, institutional integrity, as we discussed earlier. It actually helps to reinforce it.
That's an essential reminder, ma'am. AI adoption is not simply about efficiency, it's basically about responsibility, transparency, and long term institutional integrity. So, looking ahead, ma'am, what will distinguish international universities that thrive in Southeast Asia from those that struggle to sustain relevance, according to you?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Looking ahead, what will distinguish international universities that thrive in Southeast Asia from those that struggle to sustain relevance?
As I mentioned, global standards are very important. Uh, However, it needs to be with local relevance. Okay. And I think we discussed a little bit just now. The first is, of course, local integration without compromising standards. That's really important. So what we must really do is to have tailored programs and industry partnerships and meaningful learning experience for students. Even though the programs can come from UK, but we really need to ensure that the industry partnership and the learning experience are very much localized. The second point is really about outcomes and values. UK standards are very important. Coming from UK is very important. But at the local context, it's really about employability. It's really about future ready skills. It's really about professional accreditation within the local context, because we know even professional accreditation, you have UK, you have Singapore, you have Malaysia. So it has to be within the local context as well. The next one is stakeholders and community engagement. So what we really need to look at is, again, the local linkages, the local network. How do we engage with government, industry, and the local communities? Just last 2 points. Trust is very important. Integrity is very important. And I believe, I genuinely believe we need to have a consistency between promise and experience across different touch points, especially in student experience, and the skill sets that they are taking away with them when they graduate. And the last point is, this is not very common to universities, but agility and innovation, and especially agility. I think for universities, we are quite tied up in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of structure, in terms of the process of approval. Somebody was joking with me just a couple of days ago, saying that universities should really come up with a committee that looks at committeeology. And also, what is committeeology? You say, once you decide to have a project, then you need to come up with the different committees that should be set up to approve these projects, the different levels of approval. So I was just laughing. And it is true, universities are quite, bited down by structure, and sometimes to the extent of lacking agility. So what's really important is that we really need to be more agile, because with more agility, we can quickly update, improve, change the programs, the content, the skill sets that we empower our students to go out when they graduate to find a good job. Because, industry, the economy is changing so fast, whether is it because of geopolitical situation, whether is it because of AI. So agility is really, really important to me, I think. And at my university, we're still trying to improve at this particular point. So to summarize, I think we need to really, be able to be agile. And if we are, then we will thrive. And for those who fail to adapt, who are not agile, then will risk losing relevance.
That's really a forward-looking perspective, ma'am. How universities must be agile with the current education environment and education ecosystem. So before we conclude, let's do a quick rapid round, ma'am. And I will be asking some questions to you, and you just have to give one-line answers or clear takeaways for our audiences. So first to you, ma'am, my first question to you is, if you had to send one email to prospective students tomorrow, what would be the central message be around?
Just one sentence, yeah.
You can explain more also.
Yeah. I think it's really, really important. Obviously, integrity is quite important. So signaling to the student that we are an institution with very strong integrity to build that trust in the first place is really important. But I think what's really important is also the care, because I do believe as universities now, I think we have a duty of care. We should not be a factory. I mean, not that we are a factory, but there's always talks that universities are becoming a factory now. So if I'm going to send that email, I will emphasize really a lot on, of course, our world-class education as from the UK home campus, genuine care for the students, where obviously opportunities is designed with integrity. And last but not least is really to support students for success, and success not just in Malaysia, but everywhere in the world.
Thank you, ma'am. So my next question is, what's the one thing every institution university must clearly communicate on its website today?
Okay. I think this has to be very much aligned with the email we send to students, right? So obviously, trust is very important, something along the line of trusted programs with integrity. Again, integrity is a big word. And I guess the most important thing is that we want to ensure every student will receive an authentic, very high quality education that they can use it and rely on for their future.
Ma'am, one last insight from you. So, what is one action institutions must consistently demonstrate to earn trust?
Okay, earn trust. As I alluded earlier in our conversation, I think we really need to show up consistently for our students, by delivering on our promises, and with honesty, with quality, and with integrity in everything we do. So I think that is one of the most important. Do what you say and walk the talk is very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for a deeply and thoughtful,
Thank you.
relevant discussion. Today's conversation refers one central idea. International expansion is not sustained by reputation alone. It's sustained by bi-directional governance, by alignment across teams, by operational discipline, and by responsible adoption of AI. And most importantly, institutions must not only grow across markets, they must grow with credibility. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us and being part of this session. It's a recorded session, and recording will be soon shared with you in our next email. Your engagement is what makes Education Circuit by Meritto a valuable experience. We hope you have found this session as enriching as I have. We look forward to seeing you in our upcoming editions. Until next time, stay inspired, stay strategic, and keep putting students at the center. Have a great day. Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thanks.
Thank you.